I stared at my phone screen, my face ringed in red like a target, while my daughter-in-law asked her followers who they'd erase from our family. The comments poured in like poison. Every snicker, every cruel agreement felt like a slap across my 68-year-old face. So I typed back the words that would change everything. The house you're living in isn't your husband's. It's mine. And I just voted to erase you from my property. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Now let me tell you how I got here. Sitting in my car outside what everyone thought was my son's house, holding the deed that proved otherwise. It started with what should have been a family celebration. Daniel, my 42-year-old son, had just earned a promotion at his accounting firm. Brooke, his wife of 15 years, decided it called for a family photo to show off her triumph on social media. You know how it is these days. Nothing counts unless the internet applauds. Eleanor, stand over there, Brooke directed, pointing me toward the far edge of our little group. Not Mom Eleanor, like she used to say years ago. Just Eleanor, with that tone she'd developed lately. Like I was the hired help instead of the woman who raised the man she married. I stepped where she wanted and watched her choreograph Daniel and their teenagers, Grace and Noah, in the center. The perfect nuclear family. I was the add-on, the accessory that didn't fit the aesthetic she was curating. She took dozens of shots, always finding something wrong. Daniel, tilt your head. Grace, show your teeth. Noah, put your phone down for 5 seconds. When she looked at me, she just sighed, like my very existence was exhausting. The photo she finally chose was beautiful. Daniel looked distinguished in his new suit. The kids could have been plucked from a magazine, and Brooke glowed with that special satisfaction that comes from getting everything exactly right. Even I looked decent, standing a touch apart, but genuinely smiling at my family. What I didn't know then was what she planned to do with that photo. 3 days later, my neighbor Linda knocked on my door, cheeks flushed with indignation. Eleanor, honey, you need to see this. She thrust her phone into my hands. There was our family photo, but my face was circled in thick red marker. The caption read, "Family game. If you could erase one person from this picture, who would you choose? I think you know my choice." My heart stopped. I scrolled the comments, each one a fresh wound. Definitely the old lady. Why is she even in the picture? Time for the nursing home. Your family would be perfect without the extra baggage. Brooke was busy replying with laughing emojis and little hearts. She was having fun. My humiliation was content. As I stared at Brooke's post, the memory of buying that house 12 years earlier surged back. Daniel had just married Brooke. They were in a cramped apartment, drowning in student loans and credit card debt. My husband Henry was still alive then, and we'd just received a sizable inheritance from his mother's estate. "Mom, we're looking at houses," Daniel confided over Sunday dinner. "But the market is insane. We can't qualify for anything decent." I watched Brooke that night, the way she avoided eye contact whenever money came up, how she suddenly found something urgent on her phone when Daniel mentioned their finances. Still, I saw how much my son loved her, how his face lit up when she laughed, how protective he became if anyone criticized her. Henry and I talked about it for weeks. "We could help with a down payment," he suggested one evening. "Or we could do better," I said, as the idea took shape. "We buy the house outright. They live in it. They pay us modest rent until they're in a position to take over a mortgage." Henry studied my face. He knew that look. "You're thinking we keep the deed in your name as a safety net." "You know how marriages can be," I said carefully. "If anything happens, Daniel's protected." It seemed smart, generous even. When we found the perfect colonial, 4 bedrooms, Big backyard for the grandkids we dreamed about. I put everything in my name: the deed, the insurance, the taxes. Daniel and Brooke were ecstatic. They moved in like newlyweds stepping into a dream. For a while, it was perfect. They paid a modest rent, just enough to cover taxes and maintenance. Henry and I felt good about giving our son a solid foundation. But Brooke started introducing me as Daniel's mother who helped with the house. Then it became Daniel's mother who gave us money for the house. Over the years, the story morphed until most people believed Daniel had bought it himself with a tiny parental boost. I never corrected anyone. Why would I? It wasn't about credit. It was about family. When Henry died 5 years ago, grief made me softer. I stopped charging rent altogether. Your family, I told Daniel when he tried to insist. This is what family does. I downsized to a small apartment so they could spread out in the big place. Now, sitting in my car, looking at their house with new eyes, I realized how thoroughly I'd been erased from our family's narrative. Another ping from my phone, more comments on Brooke's post, more strangers agreeing I was expendable. A few souls pushed back, calling it cruel. One comment froze me. That's someone's mother. How would you feel if your daughter-in-law posted this about your mom? Brooke's response was swift and cutting. Some mothers-in-law earn their place. Others expect it because they gave birth. Respect is earned, not automatic. Earned respect. Automatic entitlement. I thought of every Sunday dinner I cooked, every babysitting night so they could have date nights, every emergency fund, Daniel's car repair, Brooke's real estate license fees. I thought about the house, my house, where they'd lived rent-free for 5 years. What exactly did I need to do to earn my place? My phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. My heart lifted. Finally, my son, ready to defend me. Mom, he began, voice tight. We need to talk. Yes, we do, I said, thinking he meant the post. Brooke showed me your comment, completely inappropriate. The world tilted. Inappropriate? Daniel, did you see what she posted? She asked people who they'd erase and circled my face. It was a joke, Mom. You know how social media is. But claiming you own our house? Too far. Just a joke. My public humiliation was a joke, but my stating a fact was an offense. Daniel, I said slowly, I do own your house. My name is on the deed. I bought it 12 years ago. Remember? Silence then. That was different. You bought it for us. It's been our home for over a decade. Yes, your home, in my house. Mom, you can't be serious. We've put our lives into this place. We renovated the kitchen, redid the bathrooms, landscaped the yard. The kids grew up here. With money I saved you by not charging rent, I said evenly. A longer pause. When he spoke again, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. What exactly are you threatening to do? 24 hours earlier, I wouldn't have known. But 24 hours earlier, I hadn't been publicly erased by my own family. I'm not threatening anything, I said. I'm clarifying the facts. Your wife seems confused about what belongs to whom. You're being vindictive. I'm being accurate. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I drove to my house and used my key to walk through the front door. Eleanor? Brooke's voice floated from the kitchen, sharp with surprise, and unless I imagined it, a flicker of fear. What are you doing here? I live here, I said simply, taking in the new furniture, fresh paint, the art. They'd made it so thoroughly theirs that it felt foreign, even though every inch was legally mine. Daniel appeared from the living room, face flushed. Mom, you can't just walk in here anymore. This is our home. Actually, it's my home. You live in it. Brooke stepped closer to Daniel. a united front against the crazy old lady. This is ridiculous. You haven't lived here in 5 years. But I've owned it for 12, I replied, pulling out my phone. Want to see the deed? It's all documented. Grace and Noah drifted into the doorway, drawn by raised voices. They looked confused. Kids do when the adult world starts wobbling. Grandma Eleanor? Grace asked softly. Is everything okay? Go upstairs, Brooke snapped. The adults need to talk. The way she said adults made it clear I wasn't included. Look, Daniel said, lowering his voice. I get that you're upset about the post. Brooke probably went too far, but you can't use the house as a weapon. I'm not using anything as a weapon, I said. I'm asserting my rights as the property owner. Brooke folded her arms. Fine. Legal games? We've been here 12 years. We've improved the property. We have tenant rights and sweat equity. You can't just kick us out. I almost smiled at her confidence. Actually, as my lawyer explained this afternoon, since you've never paid rent and there's no written lease, you're guests in my home. I can ask you to leave with 30 days' notice. The color drained from both faces. You called a lawyer? Daniel whispered. I called Walter Reed, I said, the same attorney who'd handled Henry's estate. He knows our family's finances. Very thorough man. Brooke's mask slipped. The honey-sweet social persona cracked, revealing something harder. You bitter old woman. You can't stand that we're happy, that we built something beautiful. What you built, I said quietly, is a life on my foundation, and apparently you built it while mocking the woman who made it possible. Daniel looked between us, torn. Mom, please, let's calm down. Brooke, apologize for the post. Mom, let's make the house official somehow. I was done being the reasonable one who bent to keep the peace. It is official, Daniel. It has been for 12 years. What's new is that I'm not pretending otherwise. The next morning, Walter Reed's office felt like a sanctuary. At 73, he'd been practicing longer than some people had been alive. His quiet confidence steadied me. Eleanor, he said, reviewing files across his mahogany desk, you're in an interesting position. Legally, you're within your rights. Practically, this may get messy. How messy? Your son and daughter-in-law have lived there for 12 years. They've made improvements, established residency, built their lives there. While they don't have legal ownership, they'll claim equitable interests, compensation for improvements, time to relocate, maybe a right of first refusal if you sell. I pictured the renovated kitchen, the finished basement, the deck Daniel built 2 summers ago. And what do I owe them? Walter allowed himself a small smile. Here's where it gets interesting. They made improvements without your written consent, and they haven't been paying rent or taxes. They have little standing to demand compensation. With proper notice, you can ask them to leave. He paused. But is that what you want? This could destroy your relationship with your son. I thought of Brooke's post, the comments calling me extra baggage, Daniel accusing me of vindictiveness for stating facts. Maybe that relationship is already destroyed, I said softly. Walter pulled a fresh legal pad. Tell me your goals. We talked options for an hour. Evict them, sell the house, set a market rate lease, or transfer ownership to Daniel with or without compensation. Then Walter said, there's one more thing. When Henry inherited, it wasn't just cash. He slid over a thicker file. A trust was established for Daniel, with you as administrator. It's been compounding 12 years. My breath caught. How much? As of last month, just over 400,000. I stared at the figure. Daniel had a substantial trust I'd let the bank reinvest automatically, barely glancing at statements after Henry died. The documents indicate it was to be revealed when Daniel turns 45 or upon your death, Whichever comes first, Walter added. He turns 43 next month. A plan began to form. Not revenge, exactly. Something more measured. A lesson about assumptions and entitlement. Walter, I said slowly, I think I know what I want to do. 3 days later, I was ready. Time to think, to plan, and to discover how deep Brooke's manipulations ran. I started by reviewing my financial records carefully. Henry had handled most investments, and after he passed, I'd let them hum along on autopilot. But the trust revelation made me wonder what else I'd missed. What I found made my blood run cold. For 2 years, someone had been making regular small charges on my credit card. $50 here, $30 there, subscription services, online purchases, app downloads, different merchants, one origin, Brooke's phone. She'd been using my card for personal expenses. Linda helped me piece together the timeline. I always wondered how Brooke could afford those handbags, she said over coffee as bank statements covered my table. Daniel's a good accountant, but those bags cost more than my car payment. I dug deeper. According to license records, Brooke had closed only 3 real estate deals in 2 years. Income, practically nothing. Yet her feed was full of spa days, shopping trips, expensive dinners, funded, I now realized, by my card. The total, over $8,000, small enough to dodge alarms, large enough to bankroll an online persona. The same persona that humiliated me for entertainment. Just as I photographed the evidence, my phone lit up. Brooke. Eleanor, we need to talk. Her voice sounded less confident than before. Yes, we do. Daniel and I discussed the house. We want to make this right. We'll pay fair market rent starting immediately. How generous, I said, glancing at the credit card stacks. And how exactly will you pay that rent? What do you mean? I mean, the commission database shows 3 sales in 2 years. That's maybe $15,000 before taxes. Daniel makes about 60 on 90 grand gross. How have you been funding your lifestyle? Silence stretched so long I thought the call dropped. I don't know what you're implying, she said finally. I'm not implying. I'm stating facts. For instance, over $8,000 in charges I didn't make. A beat. Those charges. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I can explain. I'm sure you can, just like you could explain why you publicly humiliated the woman whose credit card you were stealing. You never meant to be caught, I cut in. There's a difference. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the rush of taking back control. Tomorrow I'd implement the plan Walter and I built. Tonight I slept better than I had since Henry died. The game had changed, and for once, I was the one making the rules. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Grace, my 17-year-old granddaughter, showed up at my apartment with red-rimmed eyes and a determination that reminded me of myself at her age. Grandma, I need to tell you something, she said, settling into a kitchen chair with more gravity than any teenager should have to carry. I poured her coffee, noticing how much she'd grown while I'd been busy being the accommodating grandmother. What's on your mind, sweetheart? Mom's been lying about a lot. Her voice shook. I heard her on the phone with Aunt Kay last night about the credit card. She wasn't sorry. She was angry that you found out. My heart ached for this girl, caught between her mother's selfishness and her own sense of right and wrong. What else did you hear? Grace pulled out her phone, fingers trembling. She showed me messages between Brooke and her sister. Finally getting the old woman out. Claim what's rightfully ours. Daniel's too soft, needs a backbone with his mother. One from 3 weeks ago. Posted the perfect thing today. Time to show Eleanor where she stands. Daniel will thank me later when he sees how much happier we are without her constant interference. So the post wasn't a spontaneous joke. It was a calculated humiliation designed to push me out. "There's more," Grace said, scrolling. "She's telling people you've been secretly charging us rent this whole time, and you're trying to kick us out because you need money. She's making you sound desperate." I looked at my granddaughter, seeing Henry's steadiness, Daniel's gentle nature, and something strong that wouldn't be bullied. "Whatever happens between your mom and me, it doesn't change how I feel about you and Noah." Grace nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know, but what Mom did was wrong." That afternoon, Walter called with a curveball. "Eleanor, we have a problem. Daniel filed papers claiming adverse possession." "What does that mean?" "He's arguing that after 12 years of open, continuous occupancy and maintaining the property, with you not enforcing ownership, they have a claim to title. In some states it works, but the requirement here is 20 years, not 12. Relief washed over me, followed by anger. My son was trying to steal my house through legal maneuvering. "There's more," Walter added. "They hired Victoria Barnes. She's expensive. On Daniel's salary, they can't afford her." "Then how are they paying?" "That's what we must learn. If they used fraudulently obtained credit, that's significant." That evening, Daniel appeared at my door. For a heartbeat, I saw the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. "Mom, we need to end this madness," he said, voice thin. "I agree," I answered, letting him in. "The madness of your wife using my credit card. The madness of you filing for adverse possession. The madness of humiliating the woman who gave you everything." He flinched with each count. "It doesn't have to be like this. We can work something out." "You mean like the way we worked out rent-free living for 5 years?" "That was different. You offered. And you repaid my generosity by letting Brooke commit credit card fraud and by trying to take my house," I said. He sank into the chair, suddenly older than 42. "She said it was the only way to protect our family," he murmured. "She said you were unstable, that you might take the house away for no reason. So the solution was to humiliate me publicly and then try to take my house for real. When you say it out loud, it sounds crazy, doesn't it? You know what I mean?" His phone buzzed. He looked down and his expression hardened. "Brooke says you've been spreading lies to Grace, turning the kids against their mother." "I haven't said a word to Grace. She has eyes and ears." He stood abruptly. "Here's the deal. We'll pay you $2,000 a month, market rent. In return, you drop this fraud nonsense. And if I don't, then we'll see you in court. Victoria thinks we have a case. She's also prepared to argue you're not competent to manage property." The threat hung there. My own son, ready to call me incompetent. "Daniel," I said quietly, "do you remember when you broke Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball?" He blinked. "Yes. You came home sobbing. Do you remember what I told you? You said breaking the window was an accident, but lying about it would be a choice. And what did we do? We went over. I apologized. I offered my allowance to pay." I nodded. "Taking responsibility is what makes you a good man. What you're doing now isn't an accident. It's a choice." He had no answer. The next discovery came from Noah. He called while his parents met with their attorney. "Grandma, I found something in Mom's office. Can you come get me?" 20 minutes later, he hurried down my driveway clutching a manila folder. "Mom's been keeping records," he said, breathless. He opened the file, bank statements, credit card applications, printouts of my social media, notes in Brooke's handwriting, analyzing my spending, social interactions, even health info gleaned from public posts about doctor visits. "Noah, where did you find this?" "In her desk. The folder's labeled E Grant Strategy. There's more. She's applied for credit cards using your info. My blood ran cold. He showed me copies of applications bearing my name and social security number, Brooke's email, and phone attached. How many? 6, I saw. And this. He pulled a page covered with calculations. She was going to max them out and then claim identity theft. The scope took my breath away. This wasn't petty theft. It was an identity theft scheme designed to ruin my credit and enrich her. There's something else, Noah whispered. She's been recording your phone calls. He showed me a call recorder app, cloud synced. Every conversation with Dad for 6 months is saved. She told him if you caused trouble, she'd prove you're losing your memory. I called Walter. His reaction was immediate. Eleanor, this is federal territory, identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. She could be looking at years. And Daniel? Did he know? We need to determine. Also, I checked something. Victoria Barnes's retainer is $50,000. Where did that come from? Good question. The bombshell arrived the next morning in Walter's conference room, delivered by a forensic accountant named Susan Park, who had been quietly tracing the money. Mrs. Grant, she said, spreading documents across the table, your son and daughter-in-law have been busier than we thought. She slid over a thick folder. 6 months ago, they opened Jenkins Property Management, LLC. On paper, it's a legit property management company. In reality, it's funneling money from multiple sources. What sources? I asked. Fraudulent loans for starters. They've been using your property as collateral without your knowledge. The house you own free and clear. They borrowed against it 3 times this year. My head spun. How? Walter leaned in. Daniel had access to family documents. He's been forging your signature. Susan continued. They've borrowed a total of $230,000 against your house. The money flowed through the LLC to fund Brooke's lawyer, their lifestyle, and to purchase another property. Another property? A Florida vacation condo, bought 8 months ago for $180,000, cash. I stared at the paperwork. While I was living modestly in my apartment, they used my house like an ATM and bought a secret getaway. There's more, Susan added. The trust Henry established for Daniel. Someone made unauthorized withdrawals. Walter placed another stack in front of me. $40,000 over the past year using Daniel's power of attorney info. I never gave Daniel POA over the trust. No, Walter said grimly. But you did grant him medical POA last year for your surgery. Someone exploited that limited authority to access finances. Silence fell as the betrayal settled over us. My son, the boy I'd raised to know right from wrong, had been defrauding me for over a year. What are my options? I asked at last. Walter exchanged a look with Susan. We can file criminal charges immediately. Bank fraud, identity theft, forgery, elder abuse. The evidence is overwhelming. Or we present the evidence and see if they'll make full restitution and help unwind the fraud. How long would they serve if we press charges? Susan answered quietly. Daniel could face 5 to 7 years, given Brooke's planning and initiation 10 to 15. I closed my eyes and thought of Grace and Noah, what it would mean for them if both parents went to prison. And yet, what did it mean that my own son had stolen from me and plotted to label me incompetent? I want them both here tomorrow morning, I said, opening my eyes. Eleanor, Walter warned gently, once we show our hand, there's no going back. There's already no going back, I replied. That ship sailed when they decided to steal from me. They walked in the next morning like they were arriving for a business meeting, Daniel in his best suit, Brooke in a designer dress I now suspected I'd unknowingly funded. I hope this means you've come to your senses about the house, Brooke said, all poise. Oh, I've come to my senses, I said as Walter placed the first documents on the table. Daniel went white when he saw the loan applications with my forged signature. Brooke held her composure about 10 seconds longer, until she reached the credit card applications using my identity. This is a misunderstanding, Daniel managed. Is it? I asked. Explain how you accidentally forged my signature 3 times to borrow against my house. Brooke shifted into attack mode. You're a sick old woman trying to destroy her family. We've done nothing but love and support you. By stealing over $400,000 from me, I said evenly. Susan had tallied the total. Fraudulent loans, stolen trust funds, credit card fraud, the condo. That's not what happened, Daniel protested weakly. Then tell me what did, I said, oddly calm. Tell me how you accidentally opened a business using my property as collateral. Tell me how you accidentally bought a Florida condo with money borrowed against my house. We needed to protect ourselves, Brooke burst out. You're getting old and making bad decisions. Someone had to think about the future. So you decided to steal my future to protect yours, I said. Walter cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, this is serious. We have evidence of bank fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, conspiracy. These are federal crimes with real prison time. Daniel's composure cracked. Mom, please. I never meant for it to go this far. Brooke said it was temporary, that we'd pay it back once the business took off. What business? I asked. The fake property management company you created to launder stolen money? It's not fake, he whispered. We were going to make it real. I studied my son's face, searching for a trace of the boy who'd owned up to Mrs. Henderson's window. Daniel, do you remember what I taught you about responsibility? This is different. No, it's exactly the same. You broke something. Now decide whether to take responsibility or keep lying. Brooke leaned in, eyes sharp. You self-righteous. You think you're so perfect. You're just a lonely old woman who can't stand that her son has his own life. I am a lonely old woman, I said, steady as stone. But I'm a lonely old woman who owns a house you've been stealing against, and who doesn't have to live with betraying her family. Walter placed one final document on the table. Mrs. Grant has an offer. Full restitution of all stolen funds, immediate vacation of the house, dissolution of the fraudulent business, and cooperation in unwinding every illegal transaction. In exchange, she will not file criminal charges. And if we refuse? Daniel asked. Then we file today, Walter said. You'll likely be arrested by the weekend. Daniel looked at Brooke, then at me. How long do we have? Until 5 o'clock, Walter said. After they left, I sat in the quiet and asked Walter, did I do the right thing? You gave them a choice, he said. The same kind you gave Daniel when he broke that window 35 years ago. At 4:30, my phone rang. Daniel's voice was hollow. We accept, Mom. We'll sign whatever you need. 3 weeks later, I stood in the kitchen of my house, brewing coffee in a space that felt both familiar and foreign. Daniel and Brooke had moved out the previous weekend, taking only personal items. The Florida condo had been sold. The fraudulent loans were paid off. The trust fund restored. Jenkins Property Management, LLC, closed. Grace knocked, carrying a box of forgotten things. How are you, Grandma? I'm good, sweetheart. How are you and Noah adjusting to the apartment? She shrugged. It's smaller, but it's honest. Dad's different since everything came out. More like his old self, you know. I did know. Sometimes you have to lose nearly everything to remember who you are. Dinner Sunday? I asked. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. only if you promise your famous pot roast. You've got yourself a deal. After she left, I walked the rooms with new eyes. The house was mine again, but more than that, it was clean, cleansed of whispers and spin, free of manipulation and performance. It breathed. That evening, I sat on the front porch with a cup of tea, watching the sky melt from gold to purple. My phone buzzed, one of those automatic memories. A picture from 4 years ago, Henry and me on this very porch celebrating our 40th anniversary. He was looking at the camera, but I was looking at him, my face full of love and contentment. I shared the photo with a simple caption: "Sometimes you have to fight for what matters most." Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of justice. Within an hour, there were dozens of likes and gentle comments. Neighbors, old friends, even strangers sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. But the comment that mattered most came from Grace. "Love you, Grandma. Thank you for teaching us that integrity isn't negotiable." I set my phone aside and let the quiet gather. The house wasn't empty. It was full of truth. And truth, I've learned, is the most comfortable thing to live with. Now, if you've been through something like this, if someone tried to rewrite your part in your own family's story, you're not alone. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to claim what is yours. You're allowed to insist on respect that's earned on both sides. Believe me, I didn't see all of this coming. And when it finally hit me, when I realized how thoroughly I'd been erased, I just stood there, speechless. But speech comes back, strength returns, and so does peace. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me where you're watching from. Your voice matters.